Hello, Lori. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our final dun 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 live recorded webinar for this PAST session. I will be once again sending it out to you tomorrow. So anything that you missed tonight, which you won't because you're here, but if you know somebody who's missing something, then we will get it out to them. Tonight, what I wanted to do is two things. First of all, I'm going to make you a promise that I will not keep you an entire hour tonight. At least I'll try. Secondly, we're going to do two things. The first is I'd like to take a look at the rubrics so that you kind of understand how they work. Second, I thought we would briefly go over the checklist. Now, there is a voice thread that will do this. Unfortunately, you have to ask me for permission to view the voice thread. It has nothing to do with you. It has to do with my not really understanding voice thread. Someone suggested it to us. I used it, and now I'm stuck on it. You'll notice that I generally use YouTube now because that my limited technological skills can handle. In any case, so we'll be going over the checklist very briefly also because you'll be getting that through the voice thread as you finish the PAST course. Now, the PAST course will stay up, but it will not be monitored after it concludes tomorrow. So I will get, if you write to me on the PLN, I will get it and I will respond, but I'm not necessarily going to be checking the forums or anything like that once the class is finished, which is what officially happens tomorrow. However, the PAST course is there for you. You may continue to refer to it. It will be open for you. And so don't feel like you absolutely have to be finished by tomorrow. So the rubrics that I'm going to share with you, there are 5 of them. Now, in reality, there are going to be 15 rubrics. These are from the Special Education Handbook, and this is from the Planning Commentary. So each of your commentary rubric tasks is going to have 5 rubrics associated with it. And so this is the first of the 5. Now, a couple of suggestions. First, make sure that you read the rubrics carefully. Second, have the rubrics in front of you while you are writing your commentaries. It will tell you, as we will see in a moment, what you need to include and what they're looking for at each level of the scoring. So there are no secrets here. You will see on your score sheet when you get it back, you will get the number of points that parallels the level of your score on each of the rubrics. So each rubric will be scored separately, and then the points will be added together to give you your final score. Now, I could tell you the final score in one place or another. They are all different. Make sure, and they change, make sure that you check with your State Department of Education and find out exactly what your cut score is. Don't even call EdTPA. It'll be easier to find out. Usually the information is somewhere on the website of your Department of Education, wherever they have a discussion about EdTPA. Okay, so let's get right down to it. So this is rubric 1, planning for alignment and development of knowledge and skills. So the prompt would be, how do the candidates' plans build knowledge and skills for the learning goal aligned to an individualized education program plan goal? So the first thing we see is what? Let's take this apart a little bit. Where does the learning goal need to come from? You can participate. The learning goal needs to come from the IEP. So we see that right here, Individualized Education Plan. So in special ed, your learning goal has to align in some way with the IEP that you're using. Okay, so let's take a look. By the way, this is a typo. This is not level 14. There is no level 14. Level 5 is the highest score that you can get. Okay, so a level 1. Well, we're not going to start at level 1 because that's not where the scoring is going to start. The scorer is going to look at level 3, and level 3 is going to be the goalpost, for example. If they find what they're looking for in level 3, you would get a 3 on that rubric. If you give them more than what they're looking for, it would be a level 4 or a level 5. If your answer does not come up to a level 3, then they will look to a level 2 or a level 1. So let's take a look at level 3. It says the identified IEP, standard, lesson objectives, plan supports, and or learning tasks and materials are consistently aligned with each other. All lesson objectives include clearly defined, measurable outcomes for the focused learner's performance. So this is something that we've already talked about once or twice, and that is alignment. Make sure that your learning goal, your objectives, your learning tasks, your materials, everything must be aligned to the learning goal that is set in the IEP. So whatever you choose to do, whichever academic arena it is from, everything must be aligned. And I mean laser-like aligned, okay? So if you're teaching social studies, it might seem to you that you want to teach one day on vocabulary. Understand that for EdTPA, vocabulary is not social studies. It is literacy. And so that would not be consistent with a learning goal of we are learning about the American Revolution. You see what I mean? If you spend a whole day, a whole lesson on vocabulary, but you're doing something about the Battle of Monmouth on the day before and the day after, they're going to throw it back at you and they're going to say that your learning goals are aligned because your vocabulary lesson is not a lesson about the Battle of Monmouth. So is everybody clear about that? It is the single largest mistake that gets EdTPAs thrown back is the issue of non-alignment, where things don't align. So you need to make sure that your activities align. I had one student once who had extra time after a lesson was over and did something entirely different. What do you think is going to happen to that EdTPA? It got thrown back.
Kicked back, yes.
Okay, because you can't do that. You can't switch gears in terms of your learning goal, and that's why the planning part of EdTPA is so important. Okay, so that's level 3. That is the most basic level if you want to pass. Level 4, so that would be everything in level 3 plus all lesson objectives include clearly defined measurable outcome, and lesson objectives and or instructional materials and plan supports are logically sequenced to move the focused learner toward achieving their learning goal. Okay? So now we've added something to this, haven't we? And that is to move the focused learner toward achieving the learning goal. So remember, in terms of being student-centered, what does this mean?
The student has to show the progress?
Yes, the student has to show their progress. This is not just about you giving feedback, which we see in level 3. This is about the student beginning to show that they can make progress.
But Professor, measurable outcomes that will be, do we have to provide them proof of assessment, meaning like 3 out of 4 trials or within 75% of accuracy? That's what you have to provide?
Yes, but then what you do is you would come back after that and you would see if they can correct their own mistakes, or you would give them something new and see if they can do it on their own, but of the same type. Okay, so the more independent they become with the material, the more that EdTPA really likes it. So we see that in level 5, okay? So level 5, which is the highest level, is plans for instruction include strategies to enhance generalization, maintenance, and or self-directed use of knowledge and or skills and or planned supports. In other words, as my mother used to say, "Mother, I can do it myself." Okay? So you are, the difference between level 3, level 4, and level 5 for this rubric, for most of the rubrics, really comes down to how independent your student can be after having learned the material.
How do we prove independence?
Through assessments, through your videotapes, through your interactive feedback. Remember, this is why you're using the videotapes, because you may not be able to prove it on paper, but
Right.
you can certainly show it in your interaction with the student.
Sort of following on what Monica had said before. So the lesson objectives are clearly defined, could be something like the student will be able to separate coins into categories, and then progression would be like initially the student will be able to separate the pennies from the quarters or from all the coins.
Right.
So that's sort of following.
Sure, and then what you want the student to be able to do is to do it themselves. So by the end of the week, at the beginning of the week, you're going to help the student. At the end of the week, the student should be able to do it without your help on their own and be able to tell if they've made a mistake. So they don't have to do it perfectly, but they have to be able to determine that something is wrong.
And that would be shown through the summative?
That would be shown through the, for me, that'd be shown through the summative and through the videotape.
Okay.
But that has to be the pre-assessment itself that the student does not know at the beginning of the week. It has to be also on the video, and then after, at the end of the week, that has to be on the video that he got it and he's independent.
Well, for that particular, the pennies and the nickels, it would seem to me that that would be really something that you'd want a video. But for other subjects, I mean, it's up to you. It doesn't necessarily, pre-assessment can be paper and pencil tests too. And that's perfectly fine. And you certainly don't need to videotape a student taking a test.
Right.
That would be exceptionally boring and a waste of videotape. So it depends on what you're doing. In the case of the coins, it might be a good way of proving that you're student by doing a pre-assessment video, for your 10 minutes, and then post-assessment video for 10 minutes. But that's entirely up to you. There are other ways to document that as well. Okay. Let's take a look at rubric 2. Planning challenge and support for the focused learner. Remember, in EdTPA for special education, you are going to be seeing one focused learner. How does the candidate use knowledge of the focused learner to tailor strategies to provide and support access to challenging curriculum and instruction for the learning goal? So again, let's start at level 3, because that's where the scorer is going to start. And let's take a look at it. Learning tasks and planned support strategies provide appropriate levels of support reflecting the focused learner's strengths and/or needs. In other words, and this is something you should be working on anyway, how does your focused learner best learn? You want to make sure that you are providing multi-sensory experiences. One of the best special ed lessons I've ever seen was about the book Holes. Have any of you read that book?
No.
Holes, H-O-L-E-S. It's a children's book. This was middle school, high school. And in this teacher not only had the students read the book, she had an audio copy of the book that the students would listen to, and then they would compare it to the movie of the book that was made. And so not only do you have a variety of different ways in which they understood the story, the kids had a great time with it. In fact, one of the girls suggested they all come in at recess so that they could continue working on it. Because to them, it was fun. Okay, well, wait a minute, that's not how it happened in the book. They would say with the movie, and the teacher would say, okay, how did it happen in the book? And then she had one girl who was an auditory learner who was listening to it on tape. So how does your student learn? Give the student differentiated opportunities to learn in the way in which they are most comfortable. Even more so for, I see a cat. I have one also. I had one who passed away. He enjoyed being part of these seminars also. So that would be fine. Find differentiated ways, especially with special ed students, for the students to learn. Can you imagine your EdTPA scorer hearing a kid say, can we continue doing this during recess?
Wow.
That would be pretty powerful stuff. It was for me. I was evaluating the student teacher for GCU. By the way, that district hired her right away. She got a contract before she was even finished student teaching. And the principal had called me in to ask about it. And I said, after what I saw, you'd be crazy not to hire her. And they did. And I assume she's still there, somewhere deep in northern Wisconsin. Anyway, so let's take a look down now at level 2. Learning tasks and planned support strategies generally reflect the focused learner's prior learning and experience and or superficially address the focus learner's strengths and needs. So not everything is consistent with the way that the focus learner will work or wants to work, but in general, it's better than it could be. And finally, level 1, there is no evidence of planned supports for the learning goal, or there is a severe mismatch sorry, between the focus learner's chronological age or developmental level and the ways in which the candidate plans to use instructional strategies, planned supports or materials for the learning goal, or learning tasks and planned support strategies do not align to learning objectives and do not reflect required modifications and accommodations from the IEP for the learning goal. In other words, level 1, you're just not getting it, okay? It's a complete mismatch. Either the way you're teaching it, your interpretation of the learning goal, the way you apply the supports, the accommodations, there's a fundamental problem with what you're doing. Alignment is a huge one. Okay, so level 4, learning tasks and planned support strategies provide appropriate levels of support and challenge, reflecting the focus learner's strengths, needs, and interests. And level 5 is level 4 plus. Plans call for engaging the focus learner in self-managing plan supports. Again, the more independent the student can be with the learning goal, the higher the score you are going to get on your EdTPA. Okay. What I would like to do, because I did promise we would be done relatively early tonight, what I would like to do then is move on to the checklist, if that's okay, because I think you have a sense now of how this works, right?
Yes.
Is this helpful?
Yes.
Yes.
All of the rubrics work the same way. So remember the principles. It starts at level 3, and the more everything aligns, the higher your score. The more the student shows independence with the learning goal, the higher the score is going to be.
And those rubrics are in our handbook, right?
All of these are in the back of your handbook, yes. Make sure you have them in front of you when you write your commentaries.
Okay.
So when is the commentary due?
When are the commentaries due?
Yes.
Well, they're going to be due in your student teaching course during student teaching, but
okay.
they're going to be due here we go. They're going to be due after student teaching to be sent into EdTPA.
Okay.
Okay. I just want to go over this quickly. This is probably not the first time you've seen this. If it is, I promise you it will not be the last time that you see this. The checklist is something that will be provided to you in your course room so that you can have a copy of it and so that you can, check off when you have done some of the things that it mentions. So let's go ahead and we'll start with it. For task 1, planning and instruction and assessment, Are your templates formatted as word processing files? Do not send in PDF. I'll say it again. Do not send in PDF. In fact, if you can avoid it, do not use PDF. If you have me as an instructor, please don't use PDF, because in order to write comments on it, I have to convert it to Word anyway. So it just makes an extra step. But in any case, use a word processing format. Microsoft Word, obviously, the templates themselves are in Microsoft Word. Are you using content-specific templates? Make sure you have the right templates and the right handbook. Are you using appropriate lesson plan templates? And we've talked about that before. The old GCU template is the best one to use. You may use one from the student teaching site, but then you need to compare it with the handbook and make sure that it has all of the elements that EdTPA is looking for. Do your plans for language development explain how you will support the whole class and groups of students? Again, development, that is for elementary ed. But you do need to think about academic language. So consider that kind of an academic language hint. You must plan for any scaffolding accommodations you make to the lessons. That is clear, especially if you're doing special ed. Do you include clear directions for administering the assessment you will use for task 3? In other words, make sure that the assessment you're giving the students is the instructions are very, very clear so that they understand what they are supposed to be doing. Does your assessment for task 3 include the following? Quantitative questions, which can be correct or incorrect. Things like multiple choice. Qualitative questions, which are open-ended. So then you would be dealing with short answers or questions that are essay questions. Remember, these can be oral as well. These can be oral questions as well. And student voice questions, which include students assessing their own performance on the learning target or central focus. Again, remember how that fits into what we just talked about with the rubrics. The more the students can take control of their own learning, the more that you can show evidence of that, the higher your score on EdTPA is going to be. And so you want student voice on your assessments. Is there alignment between lesson plans and assessment questions for the learning segment? And here I have in bold print, alignment is the degree to which planning, instruction, and assessment overlap concepts. In other words, make sure everything aligns across all 3 of your tasks. You are talking about one single unit of instruction, 3 to 5 lessons that are all moving towards the same objective. Are you typing your responses in between the brackets? So make sure when you look at the template, you use the template correctly. Are you abiding by page number specifications? Please remember, you are not to print out the templates and write on them with, I've seen people do this, with pen, and then scan them back in. They must be typed. Imagine you're a scorer. You're going through 5, 10 of these things a day, and it's handwritten. I would probably pull my hair out, especially if people wrote the way I do. Are you abiding by page number specifications? Check your handbooks. As I've said, some of the page numbers are different depending on which handbook you have.
In terms of page numbers, references and citations, are those included in the page numbers?
Yes.
Okay.
But transcripts are not. So if you have to transcribe something because your student on the videotape was not loud enough, that would not count towards your pages.
Okay, so we should limit the number of references that we use?
Yeah, don't go crazy with references. If you quote a specific author or book, then it's fine. If you're talking about a particular concept, if you say, I differentiated this by doing such and such, you don't need to put a reference in the back for the word differentiation.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay. The thing you do need to be careful in terms of citations is the materials that you use. And that's important here in the planning task as well. If you are using a textbook, you need to make sure that you have the citation for that. If you are using worksheets that you did not make up yourself, you also will need to cite those, okay? Now, I don't know if any of you have this. If you do, you will need to deal with it. Any of you have scripted lesson plans that you have to use? If you do, then you need to rewrite them in your own hand, and you need to add some things to them that are not from the script. In other words, if you're using McGraw-Hill's scripted math course, and they have a lesson plan in there, don't send EdTPA the McGraw-Hill lesson plan. Even if you cite it, they're going to look at it and say, what? Great, McGraw-Hill knows how to write a lesson plan. And as soon as they ask for certification, we'll give them certification.
So I have a question. When we have to cite something, obviously we need a reference page. Do we just tag that on at the end of our lesson plan?
You tag it on at the end of the commentary.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
So that would be like your last page.
I have a question about alignment of the unit.
Yes.
So if there is a unit about the comprehension of the text of a short book, in that particular unit, can it be reading, writing? That would be considered as alignment?
Sure. If they're writing about the meaning of the book, that would be perfect.
Reading, writing, and then some activities that check their comprehension?
If they were, if they were writing about the book itself, that would be just fine.
I was actually planning to use a student questionnaire that was given to us by one of our GCU instructors. She did not have a reference for it. Should I avoid that?
No, reference her.
Okay, thank you.
And your course. That's not a problem.
Thank you.
Okay. Are you backing up your files in an additional location to avoid accidental loss of work? If you have OneDrive, back up everything you do. By the way, you should be doing this anyway, okay? There is nothing worse than being at the end of a very long paper, having your cat jump on the keyboard and erase the whole thing.
It happened to me.
That happened to my wife. Being the good husband I was, I retyped the whole thing. But understand that that can happen. For myself, I use Dropbox, but you can also use OneDrive. You can use anything that you want. Just use something, okay? Especially since you're going to be revising and working on this over a period of time. It's not just a one-shot deal. Are you responding to every part of the prompt? Hint, 1 or 2 sentences is not usually enough. In fact, the only time where I can conceive of 1 or 2 sentences being enough is on the first template, which is demographics, the context for learning template. Okay? Otherwise, I don't know of any of the prompts that are going to be successfully answered by 1 or 2 sentences. Okay. Task 2, instructing and engaging students in learning. Have you obtained video consent for all students and adults who appear in the video? Have you maintained privacy in your video storage location? Where you store your video is important. It's not something you can put out on the internet. It's not something you should put up in Facebook. Make sure that it's in a private location. So OneDrive is the preferred storage location, but any of them will do. Does your video contain acceptable quality audio with any inaudible portions transcribed? We just talked about that. Does your video reveal subject-specific student thinking from your learning segments? Okay. Students should use academic language to demonstrate their learning understanding of the learning segment. So again, if your student is working on math, make sure that your student uses appropriate language, okay? So the student doesn't say, if you're teaching math, the student doesn't say, you would minus that number from that number, because that's not appropriate academic language, right? What would you say?
Subtraction.
Subtract, right. You would subtract one number from another number. So that's what they mean. Make sure that the students are using appropriate academic language for that content area. And have you connected your students' prior academic learning with personal, cultural, and community assets? In other words, it takes a village. No student grows up in a vacuum. And so you want to make sure that the student understands, has a way to relate to what you're teaching them on a personal, on a cultural, and on a community level. Do your video clips demonstrate a respectful learning environment and student rapport? Okay. Again, this is why it's important to choose a student who is close to you, with whom you have a good rapport, that you will be able to work with successfully. Do you ensure your video clip meets the requirements for content and length? Content is going to be based on your commentary. Length, very, very important. If you send in too much video, they won't even look at it. They will simply send it back. Each clip should be continuous without any disruption in the footage. No editing. 1 to 2 clips, no more than 10 minutes each.
What's the minimum of minutes?
There is no minimum. But that's the maximum. Usually people tend to want to send in more than the limit rather than less. I did have a student who was clearly not listening during these sessions and sent in 45 minutes of video. Yeah, they didn't even look at it. They sent it back, and when she had to redo it, she had to pay the fee again too. So that's why I'm saying, that's why we're really hammering away at some of these issues, because it would be terribly sad if you sent in 2 or 3 extra minutes of video and they sent the whole thing back to you and you had to pay to take it again. So be very careful with this. Task 3, assessing student learning. Does your assessment criteria for the assessment include sections for quantitative evaluation, qualitative evaluation, and student voice? And we talked about that before. Does your feedback to focus students offer clear and specific information on their performance related to the lesson objectives? Hint, specific positive plus specific negative plus strategy equals student feedback. Student feedback is not just a lot of red pen on a piece of paper. That's not feedback. You need to say something positive. You need to be specific about what the student did right, what the student did incorrectly, and strategy. How are we going to address the parts of the learning goal that the student still has not mastered?
And that has to be on the video, or it can be only written?
You know what? In my opinion, and this is just an opinion, it should be both.
Okay.
Working with interactive feedback is one of the best ways to show evidence of learning. And remember, you get a little bit of extra video time in Task 3 as well. Are you analyzing the assessment in alignment with the lesson plans and learning goals? Again, that issue of alignment, we saw it in the rubrics, you see it again here. What level of thinking are students demonstrating? The highest level of thinking, of course, is critical thinking. And we want the students to be able to move to critical thinking. Again, that demonstrates their independence. Not that they can just follow directions, but that they are able to self-critique and self-correct and take ownership of the learning goal. What are their gaps in understanding the learning objectives and concepts of the learning segment? Does your analysis of student learning include patterns for different groups of students or individuals? So let's go back to our coin counting lesson that we've been talking about. So Your student is doing very well, except the student continues to confuse nickels and quarters, which is highly possible, right? So now you see the student got pennies, the student understood dimes, can separate those two things from a bunch of coins, but still has trouble with nickels and quarters. And so you need to devise a strategy that deals with that particular issue. Everybody sort of see where I am? Based on what they're doing. So that would be a pattern of behavior. Use quantitative and qualitative evidence, okay? And there's more in the handbook glossary about patterns of learning. Have you provided analysis of student learning with a chart or graphic? Let me tell you, as both a professor and as a student, there is nothing professors like more than a good chart or graph. I was a social studies teacher. I love maps. You prove something to me on a map, you're in. That's the deal. So, so yes, a chart or a graph is good. Have you used evidence to plan next steps in your instruction? So now that you know this about your student, you've assessed, the student has shown what they can do, what's the next step going to be? Does your writing move beyond summarizing or showcasing your classroom practice? Remember, it's not about you. Are you demonstrating evidence of your students' learning? Have you included research and theory in justifying your instructional choices? Now, if you do use research and theory in the assessment task, then you are going to want to cite it. And that's the next one. Have you correctly cited all references? Please use APA, make sure it's correct. Did you abide by the EdTPA originality requirements? Remember, we said before that one of those requirements is that you will cite all of the materials that you use that you did not create. Hint, EdTPA, like everybody else, uses plagiarism detection software. Okay. Have you proofread extensively to avoid any unclear, sloppy writing? Now, EdTPA is not going to score you on your grammar or on your writing ability. Okay, I'll say that again. You're not being scored on your writing ability, on your grammar, on your spelling, etc. They're not going to take off points for that unless they simply don't understand what you're saying. However, remember that you want to show your best work, number one. Number two, you're all going to become teachers. You should not be misspelling words.
Yeah.
Especially in the age of spell check. You know, when I was a kid, back in the dinosaur age, we actually had to look at a dictionary. But here we have spell check. Make sure you do that. Also know that there are citation, there's software to aid you in doing your citation correctly. Microsoft Word actually does have that. If you look for it up in the taskbar, you'll see where it says references. It can format citations for you and keep them. There are all kinds of ways now that we can make sure that when we write, we do things correctly. If you have difficulties with grammar, I would recommend Grammarly or something like that. Make sure your subject and your verb are the same tense and stuff like that. So proofread. Make sure that everything is the way you want it to be. That's why you don't turn it in the day after student teaching ends. Give yourself a couple of weeks to go over everything. Choose your clips. You may even want to show it to your mentor teacher or to colleagues or somebody who can give you feedback on it without breaking the rules. So those are the kinds of things that you want to think about doing. So you don't want to go fast. You want to be accurate.
Is there any way we could scan our final piece at TPA with TII? Can we submit it somehow for GCU?
There's no one at GCU that is allowed to read it.
No, but just the TII score, similarity.
Oh, can you put it through the GCU Lopes right?
Right.
Yeah, in fact, you're going to do that because when you turn it in, you're going to turn in each commentary into your instructor.
Oh, that's right.
So when you turn in each commentary, you automatically will put it through Lopes right.
Okay. And what's the TII allowed by at TPA?
Yeah, I don't know that there is one. Assume it's probably the same as GCU. Now, one of the problems you're going to run into is that because the student teaching course uses templates, and because EdTPA uses templates, you're going to end up with a high TII score.
That's fine because I can still scan it and see what's similar, what's not.
That's exactly right. But in terms of GCU, it's 20%. However, we do know that these templates tend to set off the alarms and everything, and so we'll know when we see. That's one of the reasons that we look at those scores.
Well, won't we be because we have to turn our templates into our student teaching class, so we will probably have to run that through TII anyways, correct?
That's exactly what I was just saying. Yeah, you're going to have
I'll make sure. I got confused for a second. Thank you.
Okay, other questions? All right. Well, friends, it has been good to have you here. And I think we have done it. I think we're a little bit before 7. Ooh, 4 minutes to 7. Oh, yes. All right. Well, everybody have a good night. If you need any help, we're here for you. And I am sure that I will be in touch with you through the other webinars that I'll be hosting, the study groups. Take care, have a good night, and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.